Record. Hey everyone, welcome back to whatever we're deciding to call this. I don't know if we've decided, but I'm Dr. Shana Keller and we have
Health Coach Caroline Powell. Hello.
And so today we're going to talk about food versus food like food and kind of, the importance of food and what its purpose is. And so I'll have Caroline start us off today.
So thank you so much. I, as a certified nutritionist and holistic health coach, food is like where I live. All things, what are food, substances, what is in our food. And one thing that I love teaching people to do is how to shop for actual food and why they need the actual food. So one thing I thought was funny was if you just, you're like, well, food is food, right? Well, according to Britannica.com, food is a substance consisting essentially of protein, carbohydrate, fat, and other nutrients used in the body to sustain growth. You can also find Wikipedia. It shows it's a substance consumed to provide nutritional support for an organism. Food is usually of plant, animal, or fungal origin and contains essential nutrients such as carbohydrates, fats, proteins, vitamins, or minerals. So I thought that was pretty interesting that even in the definition of food, you don't really find the definition of food, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I have some food items. Pecans. Pecans are a food. Maple syrup, even though it comes in a container, okay, the one ingredient is maple syrup. It is what it says it is. Raisins were once grapes, so they are still a food, right? Mm-hmm. Tuna, even if it's in a can, as long as it's just tuna that's in there, mm-hmm. is a food. So these were all plants or animals at one point that is a food source. Now, what is not a food are things like, and I have to admit, I do have this in my house and I only use it about twice a year in baking, and that is Crisco. Okay. Not a food. Do you know what this was originally created and used for?
No.
It was to oil the hydraulics in submarines in World War II.
I was afraid you were going to say something mechanical.
Yeah. And guess what is in the middle of Oreo cookies?
Crisco?
And some sugar.
Yeah. Oreo, yeah. I never liked Oreos even as a kid because like the oily on my mouth. I don't know when they started doing hydrogenated oils in it, but man, mm-hmm. that feeling, I'm like a texture person, which is maybe why I ended up being like going down the foodie route. But like,
sure.
I was going through my things as well, and we try and eat a lot of like whole foods, things you would recognize, like beans and meat and eggs. Mm-hmm. Like, that looks like an egg looks like an egg, right. Or like this. That's garlic. Like there's nothing else in there. That's just garlic. Or mm-hmm. This is a fun one, a buttercup squash. Okay, I haven't cut it open, but it's a squash like any other winter squash. But mm-hmm. the one that I forgot about, because I don't eat mayonnaise, because it's a texture thing for me, is that we have Miracle Whip, because my husband loves Miracle Whip. And I was like, this is a great example of something that is not actually food. What do you think the first ingredient is? Actually, it's water, which I was slightly surprised by. But the third ingredient is high fructose corn syrup, which I'm sure
I was going to say sugar. Mm-hmm.
Which I was a little shocked that there's high fructose corn syrup in mayonnaise. Right. Mayonnaise should be whipped egg whites with maybe some
exactly
other something
vinegar.
Else. Vinegar, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, and one of the things, what we use food for. I made a post the other day where I eat so that I can exercise. Mm-hmm. I don't exercise so that I can eat.
Right. Isn't
right?
that interesting? Because I feel like in diet and weight loss culture that's the whole point is like, oh, if I, binge ate whatever 10 cookies or something, and then I go and exercise and I make sure to burn all those
I
calories,
go run an extra lap,
you're
right?
missing the whole purpose of food is to energize and nutrify. I don't know if that's a word.
Nutrify.
Nutrify your
Uh-huh.
body.
Yep. Yep.
So you
Nutrify.
can
Yep.
exercise, so you can sleep well, so you can make love with your partner, whatever it is. Like that takes energy.
Right. Exactly. And that's exactly what the energy is about. And where our two main energy, the main sources and the preferred source of energy comes in the form of a carbohydrate. And so carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, those are what are called macronutrients. And that's just a energy um, frame, I guess you could say, of what that source is. And so the preferred use is a carbohydrate because it's a fast burn sugar. It would be kind of like thinking when you go to light your gas fireplace, you turn the gas, you flip the switch, and boom, you have fire, you have heat. Okay, so that's a fast acting burn.
Mm-hmm.
A slower burn then comes from fats. And that's when you have, like if you had put a whole bunch of lighter fluid on your charcoal grill, which we don't want to use charcoal, but let's just pretend. And you have that slow burning and you have those coals that stay warm, but it's a slow burn. Okay, so that's what you get from fats. Still good energy sources. The body just prefers to get it rapidly quick, but we need those fats so that for our like brain health, it helps with the nourishment of our joints and everything to keep fluidity, as well as an energy source. And the thing with carbohydrates is just like with any energy source, there's a clean source and there's a dirty source. And so if you start bringing in all of these refined carbohydrates, you have a refinery with oil, you have a refinery that's breaking down these sugars that are then either in a form that the body is like, I don't know what to do with this, or it's even a artificial sweetener or what have you, where the brain does not even recognize what it is, therefore doesn't know what to do with it. So it either stores it, goes through the liver, it's full of all,
And you're talking about sugar alternatives and not necessarily stevia, because that actually
like
comes from a natural source, but it's the sugar alternatives, which we will not name, but they are neurotoxic. Our body is like, it gets a sugar response and it's like, wait a minute, is this a sugar response? I think so, but I'm not sure. I'm going to respond like it is, but it actually just makes me want more, more, more. And that stuff is literally, like, the data shows it is neurotoxic. It kills our nervous system. Please don't use those sugar alternatives. Please.
And
cane sugar is better.
Please don't.
Cane sugar is better for you.
And they're hormone disruptors. So then you have the whole hormonal process that is either spiking or dropping and doesn't know if it's coming or going. And fats come in as a great alternative for that energy source, and fats control hormones too. Right. So it's really it's a joint effort. And then poor proteins, they're just like, hey, we're just protein. Can I just have some protein? Well, sure. Get your lean meats, your good fish. Eggs again are more proteins. Nuts have proteins. There's complete foods out there that if you're a gardener, I really love planting in the Three Sisters method, where you plant a corn in the middle, and then three squash plants, and then beans on the four corners. And so as the corn grows up, the corn stalk grows, the beans, if you do pole beans, of course, then you can direct the beans to go up the corn, and then the squash plant provide shade and help keep the ground moist. And there, once those all are ready to be harvested, you have a complete meal right there. You have a carb, a protein, and a fat all combined in there. So anyway, that's kind of food in a whole food manner. And the purpose of food is to give our body support to do what we need to do, and that energy to go and chop logs, to harvest a field, to help other people, whatever it is. But you've got to have good solid nutrition in you to be able to go and do those things.
Yeah, I've got an acquaintance, and she was kind of picking my brain. She's vegan, which I don't subscribe to any like major diet. It's just about what works for you, the individual. But she was asking, she's an extreme athlete, and she's like, okay, I want to do this this trail this summer, and I want to do it as quick as possible, and I want to run it. And so she's aiming to be the fastest time, known fastest time is her goal. And she's like, how can I sustain myself? She is going to have to eat the entire time, pretty much, like every few minutes, put something in her body, because she is going, above and beyond what, it's not that she can't do it, but like she's going above and beyond her body. Extreme athlete comes to mind here when someone's trying to run hundreds of miles in a day. Probably, I think it was like 170 to 100 miles a day, which is a lot. I'm like 5 miles, and I'm just, that's a lot.
Yeah. Well, and as one naturopath will tell you, if you exercise without supplementation, you are committing suicide. There are so many things that come out of you when you are sweating and you are depleting and you are pulling. If you are not supplementing, you are absolutely not going to get everything through your food stores. We just don't have the minerals in the ground anymore. And plus what you're burning through to support and everything else, you have got to supplement and preload,
Build up
so that your stores are there. Yeah. And that's funny, because one thing in, I don't know, have you ever heard of Jordan Rubin? He wrote the book, The Maker's Diet. And it's an older book, and it's a good reference tool. One thing that is great about our line of work is there are always new studies coming out, and updated information, because we don't know everything. We are always learning, and I think we always just have to keep learning. And that's one reason why I love working with people, is because I'm always learning about what works for the individual, not as the masses. Exactly. But anyway, he talks about, I lost my spot here. Ways to get sick.
Ooh.
And yeah, one of those things is, and so, yeah, it's titled How to Get Sick, a Modern Prescription for Illness. Okay. Stay out of the sun, go to bed after midnight, which we talked about sleep before. Never let them see you sweat, try to avoid sweating. No, you need all of that stuff out of there. Using fluoride toothpaste and mouthwash. Shower every day, but don't take a bath. So all of these other things, get all your immunization shots, which I thought was rather interesting. Expose yourself often to electromagnetic energy.
Interesting.
Do aerobic exercise. That's what made me think about this. Is there is really no earthly reason, unless you want to do some sort of a challenge like that,
right,
to be in this monstrous case of aerobic activity, because you're just pulling on nutritional stores that you're not going to have. And then if you end up having this monster craving of hunger, are you going to make the best decisions when you're ravenous like that, when you've worked so hard so that you can eat, or are you eating so that you can exercise and feel good?
Yeah, exactly. When kind of going off that, how to be sick from in modern times, I was listening to a podcast from one of my colleagues, and she's been in the profession. Her father was actually a naturopathic doctor, and she owns the oldest naturopathic clinic in the country in Spokane, Washington. She's been a mentor of mine, and I really liked her way of like talking about how to get sick, because it was, you know, classic American Thanksgiving dinner. You overeat. Most of the time, most of us are over drinking alcoholic beverages then too. So we've carb loaded, we've eaten way too many rich foods. And then we stand outside without a coat on after, you know, in the evening of basically binge eating, and it's good. It feeds the soul, right? And you're standing out there cold, but you know, you're continuing to talk to your family member, and the next day you start getting sick. You have that like and maybe a little bit of fever, and like you primed your body, because what happened? You overate, which means you have food rotting in your digestive system, and that produces its own issues, but it also creates dysbiosis. And then you stayed up past your bedtime, you overindulged on alcohol, and you got yourself cold. And that's not like a wives' tale of like being cold, but it's like if you had eaten a reasonable amount of food rather than stuffing yourself as we Americans tend to on Thanksgiving, perhaps that cold chill wouldn't have been as problematic as it was now, when you have rotting food sitting in your gut and you have poisoned your nervous system by drinking alcohol, right?
Right. And spiked your blood level, your blood sugar levels. And so then
it's just like 10 things we did all at once on one day, and then we wonder why we feel crummy for the rest of the year, which is like what, 5 or 6 weeks before New Year's, and then it's New Year, new me.
And then we're gonna do it again. And then you're gonna do it again at Mardi Gras on Fat Tuesday. And then anyway, yeah, that brings up exactly. I don't know, have you read this one yet?
I
Hell's
haven't.
Kitchen?
No.
Okay. So it is Hell's Kitchen, not the TV show. The cause, prevention, and cure of obesity, diabetes, and metabolic syndrome.
Wallach.
And Dr. Milan as well. Yes. And I'll just read this because it's exactly what you're talking about. Americans were placed in a classical feedlot environment, rich with a constant stream of dietary carbohydrate calories, low energy outputs, and a diet almost devoid of minerals, which ensured a ravenous appetite. The result is what we call the feedlot syndrome. Okay, so what is a feedlot? A feedlot is a farm or ranch factory operation designed solely for the purpose of intensive growing and fattening of animals for human food. Raising prime beef successfully requires a steady stream of carbohydrate, protein, and fat calories in the proper ratios specifically designed for fattening. Okay. And so just prior to this, he has a listing of some statistics. For instance, women ages 20 to 74. I mean, so that's a broad range of,
adult
women.
Yeah.
In 1960, the average weight was 140.2 pounds. In 2002, the average is 164.3.
Okay.
So 20 pounds difference. In boys, ages 12 to 17, so puberty. In 1966, they average weighed 125 pounds, where in 2002, it's 141. I can't even imagine what it would be 2020 stats.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's 20 pounds on average that the human has gained in that time frame, and is now like the new normal, although there is no normal.
Right.
But that's just when what came on the scene in the 70s. We had microwave dinners, we had TVs in the kitchens, TVs in the bedrooms, we had McDonald's on every corner.
Although I'm sure the quality of McDonald's back then was superior to today.
Well, and it's not only that, but the serving sizes is another big piece where you know, a lot of places what is served as the children's size was actually the adult serving size 40, 50 years ago.
And that's
But
so
I don't know about you, but I haven't seen any larger stomachs come into play.
no, they're
We've
the
just
same.
did
And that
what
was
we're
something
needing.
I noticed when I was traveling. So I had gone to New Zealand a few years ago, and I remember ordering a coffee, and like their largest size was our smallest size here in the States. And then and then pizza. Everybody loves a good pie, right? Well, again, here was a size differentiation of their large pizza was maybe equivalent to our medium sized pizza. And I was just like, how am I supposed to share this with 4 people? Because usually I share a large pizza with like 3 other individuals. And so I was just fascinated by the fact that serving sizes have gotten so much larger, and the quality of our food is unfortunately like becoming more, it's depleted. And you know, kind of in line with that, and talking about the carbohydrates and the feedlot syndrome. Not sure if you've heard about this, Carolyn, but I was chatting with someone recently and reminded about this. There was a Skittles truck, like old expired Skittles that weren't able to be sold. Yeah, this is disturbing. Slipped on some ice, overturned on its way to a feedlot in one of the Midwestern states where we monoculture cattle. And so guess where it was going? To feed the cows, because corn that summer was too expensive, or too much, or there was a drought going on, so the corn was going to be more expensive. And Skittles, which are made from high fructose corn syrup, good enough, right? Close enough to corn. And I've heard about sprinkles, like sprinkles you put on ice cream. Again, another like sugar store that we're feeding directly to our animals, and we wonder why our animals need to have like the highest amounts of antibiotics.
Yep.
And then again, like it's just a trickle down effect on our bodies. Oh my God.
Absolutely. And we end up being the end consumer. And so our health status is now the end result of all of that agricultural process. And, you know, if a rancher had insurance on all of that feed, you know, on all of that beef, what would be the cost of beef? But so instead we jam them full of antibiotics, and then we make, you know, make our poor cows live in this god awful place, you know. Free range chickens, grass fed beef, you know, is definitely the way to go. But you know, it goes into what is allowed, and you kind of hit on it with your travels. European food standards are way higher than our US FDA allows. And I want to talk about one thing real quick is even something as simple as spices. So I have these spices, they come in from Australia, and I didn't know about this. In the United States, we don't really have the environment to grow most of the spices that we love to use. So they all have to be imported. And when something comes in as an import, it has to sit in customs. And when it's sitting in customs, it's sitting there for how long? Don't know. But it's coming over by the barge, you know, in these big shipping crates and everything. So they're sitting there. So they have to be cleaned somehow. So they are covered with EPOs and PPOs. And these are the things that are used to sterilize operating room equipment. Okay, where if we're in an enclosed room and there was just found 1 part per million of these propolyethylene, and I don't know all of, but EPOs and PPOs of these contaminants, of these chemicals, you would have to be hazmat suited up, including a respirator, if there was just 1 part per million found in the air. However, our foods are allowed to have up to 4 parts per million of these chemicals put on them.
Oh God.
So and that's just spices. that are being imported. And so then they're being imported, they're being covered by this stuff, and then they're sitting in a warehouse where who knows what is climbing all over them and everything else. So it all goes back to know your food source and what is actually food. I have a seemingly harmless, because it says there's no artificial flavors, no colors from artificial sources, and no added MSG. Okay.
Sounds
In
healthy.
this it's creamy chicken flavor, fettuccine in a creamy chicken flavored sauce with other natural flavors, cooks in 8 minutes. It's a busy person's best friend, right? But then in looking at the ingredients, and so we had touched on this before, if it has ingredients of more than like 2 things, and those things aren't food either, probably not your best choice. But so the ingredients are pasta, but it's not just pasta. The pasta has about 6 different things in it that are creating it. Okay. Whey protein concentrate, hydrolyzed soy protein, cornstarch, chicken fat, maltodextrin, salt, carrot, onion powder, sodium citrate, potassium chloride, spices, disodium, some other word I can't even say, and then there's about 15 other things listed.
A lot of preservatives, additives to make it seem creamy and thick.
Right.
And it's, it kind of feels that like that need for that busy person that has to go and commute and sit in the car but hey, it's telling me it's healthy, so it's okay. And this is something I learned in college that I am now reiterating to my patients. If there is a label that says it's healthy for you, I would question it heavily.
Define healthy. Define healthy. Yeah.
Because, for example, almonds and the American Heart Association paid for that label to get put on there. Okay. That is a problem. When we're having people lobbying to get their way and having things appear one way when it's, I'm not dogging on almonds. I do love a good almond myself. I prefer almond butter to peanuts, to peanut butter. However, the point is if something is telling you it's healthy, I would really consider looking at the label and trying again. Because if you got hydrolyzed, what does that even mean? I know what that means, but I've also had to look into what the heck that means. And we can get into this if we talk about baby formula, but like, for example, kiddos that have a lot of allergies and they can't breastfeed for whatever reason. There's a lot of reasons, and I'm not shaming anybody that can't breastfeed. But hydrolyzed proteins are much easier for someone that has a severe allergic reaction because the body doesn't have to do any work. So, okay, are we then promoting an allergic potential by giving something that is already like basically pre-digested? And this goes into like homogenized milk and ultra pasteurized. Like, we're literally like taking the nutrients out of our food by these processes that make it safer for the consumer. So, and maybe we'll talk about this another time of like monoculture versus local food. And I'm even saying local over organic matters more, because if it's not having to travel 2,000 miles, and I do love spices too. And you're right. Like where I live, it's too cold for ginger to grow. It just won't grow. Turmeric too, it just won't grow, and that's okay. Like, I've accepted some things and I do my very best, and I don't worry too much about it. I don't shame myself. Like, I like curry. I'm gonna have my curry. Thank you very much.
Right. Yeah. So in this can of soup, what is soup? If you make soup at home, if you make a potato soup at home, what does that involve? That involves washing your potatoes, peeling them if you want. If you're boiling them, you can leave the skins on. That's okay. So you have some boiled potatoes to make them soft, and then you reduce that liquid down a little bit. You add some cream, you add some onions, maybe some bacon, maybe some cheese, whatever. It's soup, right? I don't know if I can show you. If I can, this is the ingredient list.
And half of those aren't vegetables or protein sources. It's just like preservatives, I bet.
No, and the sodium content, we talked about that. The sodium, and I do love how they have started splitting the nutrition labels per serving or per can. I don't
Yeah,
know,
that is
there,
good as
you
well.
know.
Appreciate that.
So it's, but so now you have your serving size. The serving size alone is 1 cup. Okay. This can is 2 servings. How many people that are just gonna be like, well, I'll just have a can of soup for lunch?
I do.
Okay. And so that's 2 servings. Okay. Now it's only 380 calories. However, not all calories are counted the same. But the sodium alone in just the 1 serving is 800 milligrams.
Wow.
Of sodium. And granted, this was, this is a USA product. This has ham in it, which also adds to the sodium, right?
Preservation techniques, yep.
But again, because it comes in a can, we're thinking convenience. We're thinking it can't be that bad. It's a soup, for Pete's sake. But again, that is one of the things that I also help my clients with, is how to prepare it yourself.
Right.
Because that's another downfall of our world, where we don't teach home economics anymore. We don't teach people how to cook. So it's no wonder why there's so much confusion and misinformation out there. I don't think people are purposefully going down this road of ill health. They simply don't know. And that's why we exist, right? Is to help educate and inform people so that they can make the best decision for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And soup is such a good example, because it's so, like, soup is one of those things that I go to when I don't have a lot of time to make dinner. It's like I've got maybe 15-30 minutes to make dinner and I'm hungry. Like, I'm going to quickly saute up some onions, put some carrots, potatoes, kind of
Butter.
base to you, butter. Yep. And, some kind of protein source. I will opt for beans a lot of the time, but I do use broth, and I try and make my own broth as much as possible from bones, from chicken bones or beef bones or lamb bones or what have you. And, it's not really too difficult. It's just a matter of like doing it once and getting over that hump of, I can't do this. This is too hard. I'm going to revert back. And then you have people like my grandma, who she's in her 80s and her health isn't the greatest. And, that effort, that extra additional effort of like standing in the kitchen for 30 minutes is hard for her, since she had some major health issues a few years ago. And so the can of soup, she opts for that often. And, like, again, we're not bringing shame to the table. We're just wanting to share that, it is possible to do these things on a budget and for family. And, we also understand that there are things that limit us, and there are ways that we can work around those too. Like, that's called being adaptive and resilient and working with this within a system. Yeah.
Right. As you talk about people as they get older and the simplicity, and when we've discussed digestion earlier, there's been some structural changes that go on with people's digestive systems as we age, if they're not being taken care of very well. And I know my grandfather, which was one of the reasons why I went this route, he had, when we were talking about digestion the other day, that upper flap in your esophagus, that had eroded away due to years of stomach acid. So he was aspirating his food.
No.
So he wasn't able to eat normally anymore, and so they had to put in a GI tube. And so then his final days, the only things that he was consuming for calories were cans of Ensure, of meal replacement drinks. And I don't know if you saw this article come across your desk. I don't know, it was about a month or so ago, where a registered dietitian's nurse came out and was talking about the health value of these types of drinks. So I have a plant-based protein shake that involves pea protein isolate, brown rice protein, quinoa, using sunflower oil and tapioca for the starch, along with stevia and monk fruit for a sweetener. And this is something that could count as a meal replacement because it has all of the other carbs, fats, and proteins that one needs. But looking on the label of an Ensure,
I was hoping you were going to talk about this because I was alarmed that this was being given to one of my family members that was on chemo. And I was just like, this is contributing.
right?
This is not good. It tastes good, but it's not optimal for health, not in any way, shape, or form.
No, and this, so I'm just reading directly off the label, off of the internet. It's just the back of the can from a shopping site. Water, milk protein concentrate, canola oil, glycerin, fructose, corn maltodextrin, soy protein isolate, fructose, something or other saccharides. I can't see all of it. Soluble corn fiber, potassium citrate, magnesium ascorbic acid, more soy, cellulose gum, acetate, ferrous sulfate, lennon gum, sucralose, zinc, sulfate. And those are two things that we encourage people to not intake are nitrites and nitrates, no sulfates. There's probably 50 items listed in here as ingredients.
Right. And the one I'm most concerned about actually is all the corn and the maltodextrin, because maltodextrin has been associated with contributing to asthma. It creates a cough reflex. People are, that is not how we are supposed to be consuming food. Corn that comes from the ground that you pull off a husk is one thing. Okay. And we can talk about genetically engineered food at another time, but that's not that one, that's one strike against corn, but two, what the hell is corn maltodextrin? No, that is not food. That is an additive to, let's see, what is maltodextrin used for even? I don't even know. Let's find out.
Well, if you want to look that up real quick, I'll throw this in here too, especially if it was being given to a
thickener. That's what I
thought.
It's
a thickener. Okay.
Is it body? So a lot of people have issues swallowing, so we make this a thicker beverage so it's easier for their muscles to grab and swallow.
Right. So, soy in of itself and the cancer card, those things shouldn't even be on the same floor of a assisted living place or any place for that matter. So when you're seeing soy and you hear cancers, why is that being included in your food source when it is a known carcinogen?
So I'm gonna have to disagree with you on the soy part, other than the genetically engineered aspect of it. So organic soy is what I would
of course,
go for.
yes.
But people, this is a common misunderstanding, and I had this before going to school, and I've actually seen some pretty interesting data that shows that phytoestrogens do not cause cancer. In fact, for example, like an estrogen positive breast cancer would actually be suited to have soy added to their diet because it helps to clean up some of those more toxic estrogens that get built up in the system. And so I had this same there's just it's hard to know what information is true or not. So I've actually shifted. Do I eat soy? Do I go out and eat tofu? Okay. No, I just don't really like it is really what I come down to, but I'm less worried about it now than I was, because I definitely was like, oh my God, soy is causing cancer. What are we doing?
Right. Yeah. And I would definitely agree that is a harsh blanket statement. But I do encourage people to avoid soy, especially if they, a lot of this goes back into genetic factors in what those alleles are that are attached to those particular genes. So, a harsh blanket statement probably, but it's one I'll stick with just because when you have so much inflammation going on in so many bodies, you don't need to add anything to the pot, you know. So
It's
you got to pull what you can,
yeah,
you
and
know,
and
that's
it's
easy
hard.
identify.
Corn and soy are both wind pollinated, and so in my opinion, it's organic really doesn't exist anymore because they're wind
Sure.
pollinated. The wind is
Uh-huh.
not owned. The wind blows and blows the
Both.
pollen and then next, right? So
Right.
organic,
Right.
not organic, like this is something I keep in
Mhm.
mind. Um,
Sure.
it's fascinating. The world
Yeah.
we have created because of manufacturing. Pros and cons,
Right.
right?
Sure. Sure. Absolutely. And the just real quick as we start to wrap up, there's so many things that again go into the memory bank when it comes to food,
Mhm.
whether it was a food scarcity piece or like we've discussed before, if meal times weren't a happy time or what have you, and just the angst that sometimes food causes people in any form, whether it is a health matter or a survival piece. Um, and it's just something that it seems, I mean, we just did a whole hour segment on food, but there's a whole piece of spiritual food and mental food that I really try to put upon people as well, that, it can't become an obsession,
Exactly.
because that obsession can lead you down different roads of ill health as well. And I just think, just like we've talked about, it just becomes overcomplicated.
It
you
does.
know
Mhm.
Food is a gift. Food, everybody deserves access to clean, healthy, nutritious food, regardless of your location, of your economic situation or anything. Um, and that really it doesn't have to be that complicated. It doesn't have to be writing down all these micronutrients and phytonutrient and all of these things.
Yeah.
Um, you just have to listen to your body
Mhm.
and know and do the best you can as often as you can. And that's really all we can impress upon people.
And with that is like kiddos. If you give young
Mhm.
children, when they're starting to eat, like an option, a variety of food that's obviously in smaller pieces for them to just like pick off of, they will intuitively eat enough protein, fats, and carbs on their own without us having to say, Johnny, eat your fat. You're not eating your food enough. And they will be done when they will stop when they're done if we
Yeah.
allow our children to be creative and like decide what to eat rather than telling them what to eat, how much to eat, and then the always the fat shaming. There's a lot of like yucky around our food, and there shouldn't be, because what's the purpose of food is to nourish
Right.
our mind, body, and soul. And I'm so
Mhm.
glad, Carolyn, that you brought that up about like the emotional and the spiritual components of eating, because our life, we revolve around food. And
Yeah.
I'm not going to be a monk that like goes and is breathing for 40 days and that's all I do. Like that's never going to be a path in this life. I
Mhm.
love food way too much for that. And I do think of it as a gift because I've had food scarcity, and it sounds like perhaps you as well. And man, maybe if we can get this like good food bank going, so it's not just old treats from the grocery store, old expired
Mhm.
baked goods as
Bread that's
primary
ready to mold.
thing. Yeah.
Mhm.
It's just like that's
Yeah.
unfortunate that that's how we're feeding our lower socioeconomic class folks when they are the ones that need the hand up
The most.
most.
Yeah.
So
Definitely. And you touched on a small but so very important for any um moms that are out there that might have a baby, an infant still. Um our bodies are so powerful and divinely created
mhm,
that if you're choosing to nurse your baby and you are worried about your baby's growth, I want to tell you your body is creating the perfect food for your baby. And
mhm,
to just let you know that if you choose to nurse and you're physically able to nurse and everything, you are doing a great job. If that's not your choice or you're unable to, and there are I happen to know a guy that actually has increased the nutrition in formulas, and have the case studies to prove what certain vitamins and minerals that are in those formulas are doing for your baby. So that's okay too. But just know that if your baby is hungry and you try feeding and feeding and feeding, and that's not, and then the baby's going to spit up all over, like Shayna, you had just talked about, those babies know, they know what they need. Their body will tell them yes or no. And again, as adults, we just need to go back and think about ourselves, that self-care aspect, and just trust our bodies that they really do know what we need.
That's right. All right, Carolyn. And
So yeah,
what should we talk about next week?
I don't know. Maybe we should put a poll out there and say, what would you want to learn about?
Okay, I like that idea.
Okay, so to be announced.
To be announced. All right, well, I will see you next week then.
All righty. You have a great